Hey everybody, just want to welcome you to the second installment of Suburbia's Dirty Little Secret. Today we're actually going to be talking with Jenna Bulis, who, this is actually her house, so Jenna, thanks for hosting us. Also with us we have Melissa Bevlinka. Thanks for joining us as well. She was actually in the previous installment, so we got to know a little bit about her story last time. Today we're going to dive a little bit into Jenna's story, but mostly a little bit about, Spring Creek Lodge where she attended, as well as, some of the things that kind of occurred there as well. But before we kind of jump into that, Jenna, if you can help me understand, and the audience understand, we obviously know that you went to Spring Creek Lodge. Help us understand a little bit about the time frame that you were there.
I was there from May of 2000 until December 2001, and I was sent there after I went through, I was raped, and my parents sent me to a therapeutic boarding school to get treatment because I was not responding how they wanted me to after that. So that's why I was kidnapped in the middle of the night and taken there.
Many people that go to these programs, they kind of focus in on one kind of issue where they really want to hit home. What was kind of that issue with you that they kept hammering on?
For me, it was male acceptance. That was my issue pinpointed right away because of the trauma that I experienced 2 weeks prior to being sent to the program. So on my first week there, I thought, I'll follow these rules and I can keep my head down, and I figured it out, and I thought I could figure out how to work it. And then my family rep came and sat in our group, and she said, Jenna, why don't you share to us why you're here? I said, I'm here for, smoking pot and drinking and doing all these things. And she said, why don't you get real and talk about your rape? And then from that moment, everybody in the group is giving me feedback about how I'm fake and how I have male acceptance issues and how I needed to take accountability for the real reasons why I was there. So it was just really intense attack therapy right off the bat. When I went to Discovery Seminar, it was that exact same experience with my family rep, but in front of 50 to 100 people.
Boys included.
Boys included. I hadn't seen boys in over a month. They were there, so it was that same process of me standing on a chair and them asking me, why don't you get real and talk about your rape?
Going into details about the assault and among people who had no psychological training.
Yeah.
And that continued throughout my whole program. So they had their images. They would assign your image, and throughout these different processes, it would be what's your image that you go to. One was perfectionist, which, okay, maybe there was some truth to that a little bit. But then the other was this male acceptance. And when they would make me go to that image, it was really more traumatizing. The
name calling.
Yeah, so actually, we'll probably dive into the seminars here in a second. In the first 30 days, did seminars kind of start taking place right away?
Yeah.
So seminars were part of this program. They would bring you in, just to recap, it sounds like in front of 100 people, 150 people, boys and girls, haven't seen the opposite sex in forever, really putting you on stage and having, I think, everybody, if I keep me honest, kind of calling you out in public, right?
It would depend, but yeah, they'd give you feedback. And depending on what was going on in your seminar, you might have a ton of feedback. You might be somebody who got a lot of feedback, which I feel like I was. Or you might have been able to only have like 3 people say something to you.
Yeah, and mind you, to get through the program, you actually have to pass through these seminars. They're not optional. They happen every single month, and you can do something called choose out of the seminar, which choosing out of the seminar simply means that somebody there didn't believe that you belonged there. Usually facilitator, junior staff member, or other staff member there for whatever arbitrary reason, if I'm being honest. I think I went through, accountability, which is our third seminar, 7 times.
I went through accountability 7 times. I went through focus 3, discovery 3.
Maybe you can help us understand, was each level of seminar a different topic? And was that pretty consistent across the board?
Discovery was about discovering your magical child and identifying the trauma that led to your image, which was ultimately why you got sent to the program. This like tough guy or criminal or whatever your image was, they say was due to this trauma. And when you find your magical trauma, that's what discovery is. Focus is about focusing in and finding what is your purpose. And so it's, again, revisiting that trauma, but looking at it in a different way to say, how can we take this and make this into a purpose in our life? Now, accountability is where you have to take accountability for everything. Really, it was focused a lot about the program. It was like focused a lot on points and levels, and you had to be at a certain part of your program to even go through accountability. And then as junior staff, you would go through keys, but then we also went through at Spring Creek, Cameron and Chafin, they made some of their own processes. And so we went through Trail of Lights and Gravel Pit as well, which were processes that they came up with, I believe.
Well, perfect. So I want to jump into Trail of Lights and Gravel Pit here in a minute as well. A lot of what you're saying with the seminars, I mean, you could find a lot of this in like self-help books. So maybe help us understand a little bit more on, the difference between these topics in a self-help book versus maybe some of the travesty that we saw it being executed in the program.
Yeah, so it was not a normal situation. The seminars were, the first day was usually a lot of games and trickery to try to show your like flawed thinking and how they know better than you and how you've been wrong your whole life. The second day is like a process where they have towels wrapped in duct tape and you are beating the floor with these towels as they are shouting whore, slut, or whatever your image is at you, trying to provoke this really large reaction. It's really intense sharing, group sharing, a lot of feedback. The second day is all about breaking you. Like you are just, at the end of the day, you are a mess. The third day is some big celebration where you know what your magical child is, or like in Focus, we had a stretch. Mine was a butterfly, so I had to like dance around like a butterfly.
The I am statement.
And you had an I am statement. And then in Discovery, like the first day, on the third day, you had to sing Impossible Dream in front of everyone, which is quite terrifying as a teenager to stand on a chair in front of a room full of your peers and sing. It was. So all these things, looking back as an adult now, I could detach myself from the situation. But as a teenager, when you're sitting there and you are seeing people screaming and crying and panicking, having panic attacks, screaming things at you, just this amount of emotion around you, it's terrifying.
It is totally terrifying.
People's hands are bloody from
hitting the
floor with this, and people's eyes are like swollen shut. When you see them coming back from seminar, all you see is everyone coming back with swollen eyes, and you're not allowed to talk about what happens there. And so you never really know. And you can't even talk about it afterwards, like, were you feeling what I was feeling? Because you're not allowed to talk about what happens in seminar.
But what they do have you do is you have to write, like you have prompts, you have homework every single night that you come back from these seminars where you will, when you get back, it's been a long emotional day from being there, and they'll have you write until 2:00 in the morning about the experience. And so not only is it like this really intense emotional experience that's going on, you're having to write about it and kind of like stew on a lot of the issues and topics that are going on. And we're talking, pages.
10,000 word limit. Like, it was homework. They made you. So they would say, write 5,000 words on this.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Before we jump into Trail of Lights and Gravel Pit, anything else you guys want to add about seminars you think is important for the audience to know?
Oh, we will have another video about seminars because there's so much to unpack when it comes to them. But they're just crazy. Know that they're crazy, and a lot of it is based on bunk science and brainwashing. So I can link up that kind of stuff in the comments as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, you had mentioned Trail Lights and Gravel Pit, if I got that correct. Also part of the program as well. Maybe you can help us understand, what do you mean by that? What is that?
So Trail of Lights, I thought was that's what keeps me up as an adult the most at night. So it must have stayed with me the most through my time there. And you go through it when you're about to go home. I was a level 5, and my parents had told them that I was getting pulled. And so they knew that I was set to go home later that month. And so they included me in Trail of Lights, even though I wasn't graduating. But everybody else that I was with there was all set to graduate in the upcoming month or two. And they start by just breaking you down. The whole process of it is to show you when you go home what you're going to face. So they try to show you that when you go home, you may think that you're in a great place now and that you have it figured out and that things make sense. But when you go home, it's actually going to be so hard, and you're going to have people shoving drugs in your face and this and this. And so they want to prepare you for that. And so the first part of it was they had the lower level families, which we would junior staff, which we would give them consequences. Most lower levels did not like junior staff members. So we would go to the lower level families, and they had them stand in 2 lines where it was like a tunnel where like parents would put their hands up and like, yay, as you run through the tunnel. It was a tunnel like that, but it was lower level students, and we were blindfolded. And it was lower level students shoving us and pushing at us and calling every name in the book, telling us to die, telling us we were going to fail. And that's how we started that process.
I actually remember that now. I got groped in that process, actually. Somebody groped me.
There was no limits. You were allowed to do, like, they were like, go at it to get your aggression out. So it wasn't this nice, like, oh, you bitch.
Yeah.
It was quite
this
aggressive.
This is going to happen to you when you leave here. Yeah, I remember a lot of that over and over again. Men are going to do this to you, and a lot of talk like that. Just, men are going to use you,
After you get through that process and then the Trail of Lights, you start going through the woods, and they had us doing really physical things, like just to the point where you're exhausted. You're blindfolded, you're holding onto this rope, and you have a buddy who's telling you, step your foot over, go to the left, go to the right, whatever, showing the hurdles you're going to face as you navigate when you go home. I think we did a trust fall, blindfolded. It was back in the back. But then we get to the point where they say, okay, you're going to run your number one final time. And I believe we had name tags because for some reason my number was identified to other people what it was. And so, and there was name tags in other seminars. I just don't remember.
They had us keep them, and they would have us bring them along with us a lot.
Yeah. So
I remember that.
So my name tag was identified that I had male acceptance issues.
But she was blindfolded, so she didn't know exactly who was looking at her or what was going on.
And in this process, we had to run our number one last time. I believe we had to take off we took off our blindfolds at this point. But it was everyone doing, if you were aggressive, if you were sent there for anger issues, it was men acting or boys acting aggressively, calling you names and coming at you.
Trying to get you to go there.
Like, it was a lot of emotion and to the point where you didn't know what was happening. And I was made to get on my hands and knees and told that I was a slut and whore and dirty. And that was how I had to run my process. And so after that, actually a staff member, Harmony, she walked up and she said, what is going on? It was me and another girl. These guys were surrounding us, calling us names. And so they took us to the trailer, actually, and had us write a statement of facts about it. But then they just brought us back to the process to continue and have it. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Like, it sent a red flag that something probably wasn't right there and something was wrong, but nobody did anything. We went back to the process. So I don't know what happened in the time that I was gone writing my statement of fact for everyone else, but when I came back, they then had us have write out how we would die when we went home. I had a friend that died in a car accident while I was in the program, and I was told about that. So that was how they told me I was to die and to write about how I was going to die when I got home. And then they had us have our own funerals. And so then we listened to people talk about the poor life choices that we had in our funerals or whatever. And then they gave us, everybody had a letter from their parents, I think, afterwards, because I think that was supposed to symbolize that part of them died. However, because I was just pulled in to be a part of this process, I didn't have a letter, so they just wrote down my I am statement and gave it back to me.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot. It's like, from a disciplinary action, if there's really nothing to be disciplined, that's where the accusations of abuse come in, right? So other than no point, was there really any motive in your mind that maybe you've thought about why they would kind of commit this abuse?
I think it was for the money. Well, I know this is a huge multi-billion-dollar industry that so many people are profiting off of. And so now with that, I'm able to look back as an adult. Some of these things felt so personal. Them keeping me there, them dropping me for no reason. Like, I really felt like I was fundamentally flawed, that I kept on unconsciously doing all these crazy things or coming off as fake or whatever. But when I look at it, it had nothing to do with me at all. That was just a fun side note to give me a new neuroses later on in life.
For sure.
But it was just about the money. They dropped me to keep me there longer, so my parents had to keep paying.
Well, let's talk really quick about tuition. Do you have any idea how much kind of the average tuition is per year?
$50,000 with Spring Creek, I believe.
I've been told that.
Yeah, so about $50,000 per year, which is insane, right? And for them to really have no government oversight or regulation on top of that, they have complete control and ability to keep you there as long as they need to, until the parents finally decide to pull you because they're tired, they're not seeing progress, or they're really just tired of spending money, which is kind of sad. So,
and at the bottom of this is just the fact of the matter. You're 26 miles up a mountain. Everybody in town is working at this place. At the end of the day, where were you going to go? You're in the middle of Montana, up a hill, surrounded by mountains. You see bears outside when you're walking around.
And it's a poor town. This is not a town that has a lot of money. And they actually tell all the local residents, if you catch a runner, we pay money for runners. And they paid big for runners. So if somebody did run, didn't matter. We had all the
You're
local...
coming back.
Yeah, nobody ever made it.
Probably a Cat 5, right?
Well, you're definitely a Cat 5, and you're going to be in the Hobbit when you get back.
Yeah. I think we talked a little bit about the Hobbit in the last installment, so I won't dive into that much. The question I asked Melissa with the last go-around, I'm going to ask you the same thing. is you were obviously in the lower levels for a period of time, right? Kind of struggling doing the seminars and what have you. What kind of clicked for you to move on to the upper levels? What changed?
Well, I stayed on the lower levels because I couldn't get through the seminars. So the seminars was like the main part of it, and my therapist actually finally pushed me through the seminar where they said I had to graduate because they just were tired of me being on the lower levels. Yeah. So that was the big first thing. But second part of it was that they threatened to send me to the foreign countries, which were so much more overtly abusive. And they put me on challenges. They put me on Black Cloud for weeks until I finally complied. They had me doing all different things outside of my normal day-to-day, just all these little weird challenges all the time. So finally, I just said,
sure,
I'll do this.
What is, yeah, right? Until you're like, I'm done. Please, I want to move on up. Like, I can't do this anymore. And if it came back, I mean, we had a laugh in the last installment with Melissa. Sometimes you just want to be able to shave your legs, right?
Yeah.
So
and have
no razors in the lower level?
No razors.
Like, you just need dignity. They smack that into you. Like, if you have a strong will, I happen to believe both of us do. We're strong-willed women now. But in those days, they will get it from you. They will get it from you.
Maybe we'll bring up one challenge before we move on. But I think it's Black Cloud. But you had mentioned to me previously one of the challenges was probably the most difficult challenge you ever had to do. Do you remember what that was? Do you mind sharing?
I don't think one was the most difficult. I mean, the seminars were definitely the most difficult, but Black Cloud was probably the most difficult challenge that I did because it was just complete isolation. I didn't talk to people for weeks. They could not even look at me. I had no interaction with people at all. And that is too much for me. I'm a very social person. I like to talk. Having to be on silence 23 hours a day was torture enough for me.
It sounds like it's not even the silence part. It's others are not allowed to even acknowledge your presence, look at you.
And so it just, to me, it started getting me so in my head that I just was like, is this real? What is even going on? And having some really unhealthy, weird thoughts.
How could you not? How could you not? I mean, you're just broken down at that point. You're isolated, you know?
I would scream at people, like trying to get there. I remember the boys' families would be walking by and I'd be like, hey, boys! And like do something to try to get someone's attention. And no one would acknowledge me. They would just be like, it was like I was not even there.
Yeah, that's insane. Do you have a challenge that you remember that was pretty hard?
I have challenges that, you know, I had a lot of challenges. Most of them were actually going into other families because they called me codependent with other girls. That's right. In the families that we were in, meaning to say I was afraid of all of the other girls because they were trying to drop me all the time. So I would pair off with one or two, become friends with them, and then they didn't like that. They called it unhealthy because I didn't trust anyone else. So they actually forced me into different families. And I think in the course of my time there, I was in like 4 different families, which were all of them.
Yeah, they kept moving you intentionally, right, to break the codependency. Well, before we move into you leaving the program, is there anything worth speaking about to the audience about maybe more of it around the operations or logistics of the program?
I would just, if I could have anybody take something from my story, I would say that it further traumatizes people and that no credentials of staff required, no background checks that let predators work with people that are assault victims. It's just the whole system is so corrupt. I really just encourage anybody, if you have made it this far into the video, please research and see how corrupt the system is. That's it.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I guess last question. I mean, how did you get out, and what's maybe been some of the aftermath, that you've been dealing with post program?
I got pulled after a financial dispute between my mom and the program director. But my story, the program director actually offered me to stay there free of charge and babysit his kids and live with him and work on college credits, which I don't know why they didn't have me do that while I was actually a student there, because I graduated high school and I just had watched his kids, but that's what was offered to me. I don't know what his intentions were, but now, as an adult, looking back, I feel like that was inappropriate for him to offer that to me, and what I've seen happen to other students in years later makes me think that those intentions were not pure. So, thankfully, I went home, and I think that I struggled definitely right away when I got home. I was out living on my own fairly soon after, but I think my biggest thing was through life I have gone through phases of complete perfectionism and then breaking and doing something really dramatic and big and crazy, and then overcorrecting with perfectionism and then doing something big, dramatic, and crazy. And it wasn't until I can see how much it linked back to my time at the program that I'm seeing that was a cycle that has continued in my life since then from not dealing with that time before.
Perfect.
I completely agree with that. Once I started understanding and finding, especially through social media, other survivors, other people that have been in these situations, we started kind of comparing notes, and some of these situations would come back and I hadn't dealt with them for years, and you just have to kind of work through all of the emotions, throughout that time and make sense of why it is that you feel the way you do about situations. And I'm not trying to be vague, one of them being specifically about, for me, like claustrophobia. We talked about that a little bit, right? Triggering items that come up in life, and you just have to kind of figure out how to work through that because you never really got to the root of those issues.
Yeah, and it's hard to understand too. I mean, being a teenager and in your adolescence and kind of going through young adulthood and just not knowing what you don't know, right? So when we kind of hit our 30s and whatnot, we start to really mature and understand some of the reasons why maybe we have some of these cycles and whatnot, and what we can do to break these cycles. And I really like the point, too, of connecting with fellow survivors across social media. There's tons of platforms out there, and I know working with these two here, it's definitely some good connections out there to lean on, to ask questions, to seek feedback, and to really seek help and support. Last words?
Please make sure to like and follow our new Facebook page and our Instagram page and our Twitter page because we're posting updates there of upcoming campaigns for survivors to speak out and tell their stories and ways to connect. So it doesn't just have to be connecting through a support group. We hope that these channels can be a way for people that may be starting to have these kind of thoughts can come and figure out some of that stuff. So
just an open dialogue. I think, to add to that, you're not alone, right? We're not alone. We're survivors. There are many more people coming forward. And, we've done a lot of collaborative work together. And I can say that, it feels better being together rather than trying to figure it out on your own. That's just me.
Perfect. And then from someone not being in a program, right? This is definitely meant for support of program survivors, but there's a lot of obviously friends and family out there that have been part of it, part of the journey and whatnot. So definitely, if there's anybody struggling, with a friend or with a family member that's gone through and has become a program survivor, definitely share this link. Go to the Facebook page and Twitter, like Jenna was saying, and yeah, you're not alone. There's a lot. Seek the help you need. With that said,
make sure to ask any questions that you have in the comments. And
is that where we point
on
out?
all of our social platforms, we'll check them all. So make sure to comment on there, and we hope to do videos in the future to address those those questions.
For sure. Well, I just want to thank Melissa and Jenna for being with us, actually sharing some really good insight and some of the, really diving into some of their personal experiences. It's not always easy to do that, so thank you. I'm Mark Grancy, and take care until next time. Bye.